This photo represents something that has played a significant role in the lives of teenagers across the world for the better part of the last 10 years or so. Social media and the hyperconnectedness of the environment is overwhelming, and engaging in this environment so often can come at the cost of the user's emotional health, especially for teenagers who are still finding their place in the world. Because there is a possibility of harmful emotional consequences with the prevalence of social media, I decided to use this opportunity to investigate the association between social media usage and its effects on self-esteem. Before investigating the topic on my own terms, I did a little background research of my own to find information that was already out there. I learned that the number of people engaged with social media at the beginning of the previous decade was fewer than 1 billion people. The most common platform used was Facebook, which began to outrate the use of MySpace, and people really only used it to stay connected with friends and family that they didn't see every day. It was really the main source of media and wasn't interconnected with other apps like the situation we have today. Not everyone was spending the good part of the day on their phones. Since the beginning of the last decade, the number of people using social media has tripled. This has caused the nature of the digital world to change. Because so many people are engaged in this world, there is a pressure for people who are not yet involved to find a way to get involved. Once people have a front row seat to what is happening in everyone else's lives, the new goal isn't just to stay connected, but also to produce the same quality of content that showcases a certain stigma. This is what can be harmful to a user's mental and emotional health. A study reported with NCBI in 2018 investigated self-esteem, social comparison, and Facebook use. This study found that a low self-esteem influences the need to compare oneself to others, which can be easily done through the use of Facebook. Since there is a cause and effect relationship in this study with self-esteem as the cause of social media usage, I was curious to know if social media usage could be the cause of low self-esteem. After collecting my own data, I found this to be true in some but not all cases. The effects of social media are more diverse than I had anticipated, and it is a multifaceted tool for learning and interaction. In my primary research, I conducted a study that included 10 female participants between the ages of 16 and 21. I asked each participant to record their screen time, which is reported automatically on the iPhone, on the dates of March 5th, 6th, and 7th for social media apps such as Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and Facebook. These users did have some screen time reports for YouTube and Facebook, but the large majority of information was included in the screen time reports for the other 3 apps. The next step for the participants was to complete the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale at the end of the 3 days, followed by 5 interview questions that allowed them to elaborate on their experiences. Now you may be wondering what the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale is. The RSES is an evaluation of self-esteem developed and produced by American psychologist and researcher Marshall Rosenberg. The scale measures self-perception of self-worth by answering 10 reflective questions of both positive and negative nature. These answers are calculated and scaled for a score out of 30. A score of 16 and above reveals a high self-esteem, and a score of 15 and below reveals low self-esteem. The first figure represents the participants' screen time reports using Instagram over the 3 days of study. As you can see from the graph, Riley leads the 10 participants significantly in Instagram usage, and Bridget uses Instagram the least. This next figure displays the amount of time spent using Snapchat. Again, you can see that Riley leads the 10 participants in the amount of screen time used for this app, while Bridget uses it the least, specifically for only a few minutes on one day of the study instead of all 3. Finally, the third figure displays the amount of time the participants use TikTok. Leah leads the participants by nearly 200 more minutes than the next highest screen report. You can also see that Quinn does not use TikTok and Kayla uses it a very limited amount. This bar graph you view on your screen is a comparison of the total time spent using social media with each participant's total RSES score. This figure may seem a little confusing at first, so allow me to explain it. The gray bar for each participant represents the amount of time spent using social media collectively over the 3 days as a percentage of the potential 72 hours they had to use social media that would be included in the study. For example, Quinn spent 2.36% of her time between the days of March 5th and March 7th using social media. The blue bar represents the reported RSES score at the end of the 3 days. Here, you can see Quinn's RSES score is a 20 out of 30. This reveals any association between self-esteem and the amount of social media usage, and some of these users reveal notable statistics. As mentioned before, a score of 15 or below reveals a low self-esteem. Those with what is considered a high self-esteem are marked with a green star, and those with a low self-esteem are marked with a yellow star. The participants with a yellow star or low self-esteem are Bridget, Riley, and Sydney. In regards to my initial hypothesis that more time on social media would cause a low self-esteem, Riley and Sydney are fairly representative of that inquiry. However, Bridget reported a low screen time but a low self-esteem. Let's let these participants elaborate on their personal analysis. To what extent does social media impact you daily? How important or unimportant of a role does it play in your day-to-day life? Bridget responded, "Social media impacts me strongly every day. Every social media platform portrays images of how my life should be, and that affects me. Some days it affects me more than others if I'm already having a bad day and seeing something that hurts me." Riley commented, "Social media heavily impacts my life. It provides me a great deal of my entertainment, connects me with my friends, and sets trends and social norms that I like to keep up with." Sydney also responded and said, "Social media is a very important part of my life. Days that I stay off my phone and away from the media feel really different than every other day." These three participants also responded to the question, "As someone who grew up in the developing age of digital connectivity and the expansion of social media, how has your experience changed over time? Are you more involved now than you were, say, 5 years ago? Are you less involved? If so, why has your experience changed?" Bridget responded and said, "I feel that I am less involved than I was 5 years ago. After school, there wasn't a lot to do except join a sports team and hang out with neighbors. Now it is a lot easier to spend time alone on social media. There is also a lot of pressure to post on social media when I don't even like taking pictures. I think it sometimes spoils an experience if I am focused on what I'll post instead of just enjoying the moment." Riley also responded and said, "Before Instagram, it was games like Wii and making avatars, and as time moved along, it became publicly sharing photos and thoughts from my life to others and seeing others' lives as well. It has created a social standard that many feel they have to live up to that other generations did not experience." And finally, Sydney commented, "I feel like I have always been very involved and definitely more so than I would like to be. However, I'm more conscious of how much time I spend on it and what kind of material I post because I don't want to waste too much time or post so much that it seems that it's all I do." Another notable response question is, overall, how would you describe social media as a factor on your self-esteem? What kind of encounters or experiences are most impactful for you? Bridget's response is, "I think that social media has lowered my self-esteem. Seeing other people having fun whenever I'm not makes me really upset, and I feel pressure to go out when I don't want to." Riley's answer is that it 100% negatively impacts it because I see everything I'm not, which is okay, but I tend to compare myself. And finally, Sydney answered, "I would say social media has done more harm than good in my life. My self-esteem has been impacted so much more than it would have been if I grew up in a different time or chose to never get involved." These three participants exemplify my initial hypothesis that social media generally has a negative impact on self-esteem. However, these participants' recognition of this association is an interesting element to their experience that I had not considered yet. Riley and Sydney are both conscious of both the amount of time they spend on social media and the toll it takes on their self-esteem. There's also an emphasis on the pressure of being involved in keeping up with trends. Bridget's social media screen time report is the second lowest of all 10 participants. According to her interview responses, she limits her time on social media because it is not a particular interest of hers. There is a level of pressure that should be avoided, and it is better to live in the moment. This idea of keeping up with trends and feeling a pressure to be an active and contributive member of social media connects to this idea from Viola Williams' study of avatar creators and gender. Williams wrote, "The problem with stereotyping is that it is not necessarily an accurate representation of traits, but also that the stereotypes themselves are applied liberally to a variety of individuals as though they had a collective identity. This is a similar notion attributed to the stressful social media environment because the stereotypes of teenage and young adult females is that their social media represents the perfect life that is similar to that of everyone else's. If the user is unable to keep up with trends, produce perfect content, or stay involved in what others are showcasing in real life as well, the user may be inclined to feel that she does not belong in the virtual world." Now let's take a look at those with higher self-esteem according to the primary research. Caitlin, Abby, Grace, and Kayla all show from the RSES score that they have higher self-esteem compared to the other participants. However, their screen times also vary between low and average screen times. Let's allow these participants to elaborate on their experience as well. In what ways has your involvement with social media impacted you positively? How so? Caitlin responded, I get to talk to friends on social media, and people can compliment you in your comments, which can be a self-esteem booster. Abby commented, some social media apps have given me helpful tips on school, nursing, etc. Grace also commented, it lets me have a break from the rigor of my day and allows me to keep in contact with my friends easily, which I definitely need those two things in my life to keep me sane. And finally, Kayla wrote, social media has broadened my horizons on a lot of topics. It has shown me new styles of clothing that I haven't seen before, and also happy videos of family or when loved ones return home from the army. I like posting pictures and also seeing others posting pictures. It's a way to update people you aren't super close with. Responses from this interview question are also notable. Overall, how would you describe your social media as a factor on your self-esteem? What kind of encounters or experiences are most impactful for you? Caitlin said, sometimes social media makes me feel bad about myself, but there are a lot of positive messages on social media that can be exactly what I need to hear at times. Abby commented, overall, it doesn't usually affect my self-esteem. Sometimes it motivates me to do things or activities that I see on social media. Grace replied, I think social media does have an impact on my self-esteem. In a positive way, I'm able to express who I am and what I want people to see about me. However, while I'm doing that, so are many other people, which as we are human, instinctively compare ourselves to what we post or look like compared to them, which can be harmful to your self-esteem. And finally, Kayla said, I would say that social media is somewhat of a factor on my self-esteem. Seeing super pretty and skinny girls post pictures do make me think, why don't I look like them? It messes with my mind for sure. I do like the positive side of social media where people spread awareness to issues. The most impactful experience I had with social media is probably seeing other girls that have the perfect face and body. I compare myself to everyone that I see on these social media platforms. I don't do it on purpose, it just happens. These 4 participants offer an alternative perspective on social media usage. They comment that it has the potential to lower your self-esteem, but some of its ability of having multiple purposes and features allow it to outweigh the negative effects. Abby says it really has no significant impact on her self-esteem. Caitlin's opinion is that it can boost your self-esteem, and Grace and Kayla see it both ways. It can lower or boost your self-esteem. The responses from these 4 particular participants connect to some of G's learning principles about finding things about yourself while being immersed in a virtual environment. G wrote, the learner's hopes, values, and aspirations for the character, and the project the learner makes the character, the history he or she builds for that character, have their source not just in the learner's real-world identities, though they must certainly partially have their source there as the learner reflects on his or her values, desires, aspirations, and goals. They also have their source in what the learner is learning about the virtual identity and the virtual world. Caitlin, Abby, Grace, and Kayla all have noted something that they take away from being active on social media, whether it be finding the good things about yourself that you may have trouble seeing from time to time, learning things about school, exposing yourself to different issues, or using it as an escape from the pressures of the real world. It still has the capacity to impact self-esteem, but its effects aren't always negative. So, after hearing these responses, where does this really leave us? Does social media have an impact on self-esteem? Yes. Is it possible that these effects can be negative? Also yes. But are they always negative? No. And is self-esteem the only thing that we can take away from social media as being active users? Also no. This analysis of the association between self-esteem and social media did not support my hypothesis that the impact of virtual socialization lowers the self-esteem. However, the analysis was not inconclusive. It did gather that emotional impact is more often than not a side effect of using social media, but there is a lot more to it than its users have to gain about themselves and the world than simply an effect on self-esteem.